Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Marketing Made Easy for HR Consultants with me, Nick Paninsky. Today, I'm wanting to share with you the ins and outs of my first ever webinar. If you've ever wondered what it's like to host a webinar or a live online event, or if you're thinking about running one yourself, then stay tuned. I'm going to walk you through my experience from the preparation to the execution and everything in between. This is the Marketing Made Easy for HR Consultants podcast, a show to help independent HR consultants get a pipeline of perfect fit, high-paying clients without expensive adverts, time-consuming social media activities, or energy-sapping and monotonous networking meetings. I'm your host, Nick Paninsky, author of How to Land Your Dream Client, a book which explains everything you need to know to get every sale and client you ever want. And if that sounds interesting, then make sure to grab your copy from the influential consultant website today. That being said, let's get into today's show. Okay, so let's start off with the basics. The topic of my webinar was how to get more clients for your HR consultancy. Very simple, very clear what the webinar is all about. Getting clients for your HR consultancy. And I think that's really important. If you're going to run a webinar, then make sure that the headline, make sure the name of the event is very clear on the outcome that your audience will achieve. So for me, obviously, I was aiming to help self-employed HR consultants, just like yourself, and the ones who are struggling to get enough clients, enough leads, enough sales, enough profits, all that good stuff. And my goal in the webinar was to provide them with the valuable insights into marketing and sales strategies that can make a real difference in their business. Specifically, I shared 3 key secrets that people don't think about enough when they're going to market, when they're setting up their own business. And overall, I think I achieved my objective. The feedback was really good, as we'll come on to shortly. I sold a few copies of my book afterwards too. So if we can agree that actions speak louder than words, then we can agree that people valued the information that I shared and they wanted more of it. And that's always a good thing, right? So let's go back to the beginning though. In terms of preparation for the webinar, that was honestly quite the journey. I downloaded a template from a Facebook advert and filled it in and then refilled it in multiple times. I must have spent at least 10, 12 hours filling it in. And honestly, when I was downloading that template from Facebook, it was, I was a bit unsure about whether or not it would be any good. I work in marketing and sales and I click on a lot of adverts on Facebook, on Instagram to see what's on offer. So I get swamped with marketing and sales adverts. The jury's always out for me whether or not the advert will be any good, whether or not the content will be any good. But honestly, the template I downloaded was absolutely fantastic. And I'm glad I spent, because the template I think was free. And then I paid a little bit extra to get some extra videos, to get some extra insight into how to fill it in as well as you could. And honestly, I'm glad I made that investment because I think just having the template without any kind of information around it, that wouldn't have been as powerful. It wouldn't have been as good for me. It wouldn't have been as helpful. So I'm glad I spent that extra money and got the videos to help me create the webinar. And even though, once I'd filled it in, even though I had to change one of the 3 secrets, it didn't quite hit the mark. Overall, it was relatively easy to fill it in once I understood what the point of the webinar was. Once I realized what I wanted to share and once I realized how to complete the webinar. But, in terms of rehearsals, I must have run through it at least 2 or 3 times, ran through my presentation on my head on numerous occasions, where you walk into work and I'm just thinking constantly about the webinar, constantly. So for about a week and a half of my life, all I could think about was the webinar. So while the process was intense, it was also incredibly valuable for refining my content. I spent so much time thinking about it that's when I realized that one of the 3 secrets wasn't going to hit the mark. And one of the other secrets, I'd filled in the information, but I was thinking to myself, I think I need to hammer this point home. And I think that I did that really well. As I say, the feedback was really good. One thing that was really helpful is that I didn't face that many challenges during the preparation, aside from having to, look over the content. Overall, there weren't many major challenges. I created the event, I launched the event, I invited people along, and that was it, really. The real challenge was just getting everything right and ensuring that the content was impactful and engaging. In terms of the actual day of the webinar, well, everything went really smoothly. There was no technical hiccups. And the audience were fully engaged. Lots of engaging with me when I was asking them questions. They were actively participating, they were sharing their thoughts and letting me know that when they had those light bulb moments. So it felt fantastic to see such positive engagement and to know that the content was resonating with them. I was achieving my objective of helping HR consultants to understand more about marketing and sales. The only unexpected twist was that I didn't have access to the room that I was expecting in my co-workspace. Where I'm filming right now, this is where I wanted to be, where I was having the webinar. There's a curtain here. It's an enclosed environment. But it wasn't available when I was running the webinar. So I ended up in a public area, where people could walk past, and it was just outside, on the other side of the toilet. So every time someone used the hand dryer, you could hear that noise. But I think overall, despite that, it went really well, the webinar itself. But I do wonder what people, in the co-work space were thinking as I prattled on for about an hour and a half. As I say, ideally, I would have been presenting in a private room like this instead of having an audience online and an audience external as well. But, I think... Yeah, overall, as I say, I think it went really well in terms of the preparation and actual delivery. Reflecting on the experience, though, I think my biggest takeaway was realizing the need for a better follow-up process. So I'm planning now to reach out to everyone who attended, but it didn't occur to me before the webinar that I would need to follow up with everyone. They're obviously going to join my mailing list, but in terms of a personal follow-up, I've asked for a bit of feedback and I've got some really good feedback. So I'll be sharing that in the coming days on some LinkedIn posts as I promote the next webinar. But in terms of, the follow-up, I think, actually having clear in my head after 4 or 5 days, I will follow up with these people. If they do this, if they buy the book, then great. If they leave the call at any point, if they don't join the call, the webinar, et cetera, what are the possible outcomes for that situation, in terms of the webinar engagement? How do I follow up with each of these people? So yeah, I'll definitely refine that approach for the next webinar. But before the event, I was actually pretty nervous. It was my first time, after all, online. But during the webinar, obviously before an event, you start to wonder about what if, what if this happens? What if that happens? You have no relevant experience to reflect upon. There was nothing to reflect on. I was stepping outside of my comfort zone. And obviously that's always a little bit nervous. There's also that context of people potentially are judging me. So there was a bit of nerves before the event, but I think during the webinar, I felt great once we kicked off. I got into my stride, especially with all the positive feedback which was coming through. I'd rehearsed so well with the prep for the actual webinar, for the content. I knew what I was going to talk about. I knew that it was good content. So once I got into my stride, once I started getting some positive feedback from people, once people had started to turn up, because, I was really worried that no one would turn up, despite the fact that I'd invited people along. They said they were coming. And as it turns out, I think we only got about 50% of the people there, but hey ho. But yeah, I think that was a big one. Once people got in there and, they shared some notes, and I think I really hit my stride. So that was really good. After the event, I felt really calm, really incredibly pleased with how it went. As I say, I got a lot of positive feedback during the event. I got a lot of positive feedback after the event. I stayed on the webinar afterwards to talk through with one of the delegates. And, Sam, if you're listening along, that was really kind of you to help me out there. And just, I think because you've got so much energy, you just want to share that with someone. So Sam was really good, and she listened to me prattle on and gave me some feedback about what went well, etc. I think I was so busy in the moment presenting, I wasn't really having much time to reflect. I didn't take any screenshots of all the positive comments which were flooding through. So, again, that'd be something I'd like to change for next time. But yeah, overall, I was incredibly pleased with how the event went. And I even took the rest of the afternoon off as a little reward to myself. Despite loving, my job, despite the fact that I love what I do, I finished the presentation at about 3:30. I had a quick chat with Sam, and then it was 4:00, and I was like, I'm done. Let's go. Let's go and chill out. So, yeah. In terms of whether or not I would recommend a webinar for you, would I recommend that you, as a HR consultant, as an expert in your field, would I recommend that you run a webinar to generate leads and clients? And the answer is absolutely. I think webinars can be an incredibly effective way of communicating with your audience, of demonstrating your expertise, and ultimately of generating leads. There's a crucial piece of advice, I would say, is make sure that you have great content. As I say, I got that template. I invested in some videos to help me produce a better webinar as well, because there's one thing having the webinar template, there's quite another actually filling it in with great content. So for me, make sure that you have great content, make sure it's going to hit the mark, make sure you prepare beforehand, I think is really key. Just, I'm sure you will. But I think don't underestimate how much time you're going to have to invest in this. As I say, building it, preparing it, delivering it, and then following up. It's not a 2-minute and jobs are good. And make sure to include a compelling call to action. I think that's one thing that I thought about afterwards was that, I talked about my HR consultant's complete client control solution and explained a little bit about what that was about, and then said, if you want to discuss it with me, have sign up on the website, etc., etc. But I think what would have been better would have been a different call to action. So I thought about that now, and I'm going to change it for next week's webinar, 2 weeks webinar. So there'll be a more compelling offer, something more beneficial to the audience. So as I say, your content needs to offer real value, and your call to action, that's got to be designed to generate revenue and or grow your mailing list if you've got one. And if you don't have one, you should have one. Overall, as I say, don't underestimate how much time and energy running a webinar will actually require, because preparation. It can be a significant effort, but the rewards in terms of that engagement and, the client acquisition, it's well worth it. The more effort you put into something, the more reward you will get out of it. So, in terms of the feedback, as I say, everything was overwhelmingly positive. A lot of people kept saying, light bulb moment, that really resonates. Thanks for sharing this. And we also got a little bit of participation because I was sharing about one of the secrets, and one of the HR consultants was saying, well, how do I do that? So, I brought her in off mute and then asked the audience to share some thoughts. I think that was really beneficial for her. But overall, the responses were really encouraging, and it was clear to me that I think, unless people were just being polite, that the content was hitting the mark. As I say, I don't think people were just being polite, because I've had sign-ups to the mailing list and I've had people buy the book. So, I think overall, it went really well. And as I say, I am going to host another webinar. I'm going to tweak that call to action, as I say, but I can't reveal too much about the webinar. It's going to be the exact same content apart from a different call to action. So if you didn't make the first webinar, how to get more clients for your HR consultancy, then take this as your invite to join the next webinar. It's going to be as I say, it's going to be the exact same thing, but a little bit of a tweak. And I'm going to schedule it for August 15th, which is a Thursday at 2 p.m. I did read online that I shouldn't have them at 2 p.m. because that is the post-lunch lull. But for me, that's when I want to have the webinar. Perhaps I should look at scheduling one in the evening in the coming weeks. But for me, I mean, morning is when I like to get some really deep work done. So yeah, I'm going to host the webinar in the afternoon. I think most people are like that, get the work done in the morning, get in, bash, 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 full of motivation. And then, the afternoon can be taken a bit more of a relaxed atmosphere. So for me, I think the webinar is best held in the afternoon. And as I say, I might put one in for the evening because some people are just so busy at work, right? So yeah. As I say, you are hereby invited along to the one at 2 p.m. And if there is one that you see, when you click on that, you will see other events by this host. You will see that perhaps there is one set for the evening. You're invited to both. So in terms of, for anyone considering running their first webinar or considering running webinars, preparation is crucial. Make sure everything is ready to go, that you've got engaging content, that you're asking lots of questions. I was asking some open questions, some closed questions. Sometimes I just wanted people to say yes. I wanted to make sure that they were listening along. And sometimes I wanted to ask an open question that said, that forced them to think for themselves a little bit. So, I had that nice alternate option for them. I think as well, having a good presentation space is really important to avoid any disturbances. I think I had someone come along and rudely said, this is a co-work space, we're supposed to be quiet, blah, 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 why are you being so loud? That would have really ruined things. Thankfully, it didn't happen, and that was not the plan for that to happen. But it could have happened. That could have been a possibility. So thankfully, that didn't happen. And as I say, make sure that you've got a good presentation space. Make sure that no one's going to come along and disturb you. Yeah. Anyway, hopefully that's helpful. Before I wrap up today's episode, I wanted to share one last thing. The most memorable part of the webinar for me was, the positive feedback, the appreciation from the attendees. It made it extremely rewarding for me to know that the information that I was sharing, that I'd spent time crafting and creating, that it was making a real impact. That was extremely rewarding for me. Even more rewarding than selling copies of my book. So, yeah, that's it for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in and joining me on this journey of reflection upon webinars. If you enjoyed this behind-the-scenes look at my webinar experience, then, make sure you subscribe. Make sure to leave a positive review on podchaser.com and share this podcast with anyone who might find it useful. And, remember, if you want to learn any more about getting clients for your HR consultancy, then join me on my next webinar on August 15th at 2 p.m. Details will be coming soon. They'll be on Eventbrite. I'll share a link in the show notes, and I'll also talk about this extensively on LinkedIn and put it on my mailing list. So, if you want some information, make sure to join my mailing list. You'll hear about all these kind of offers and opportunities. So yeah, that's the best place to be. So yeah, until next time, this is Nick Paninsky signing off from Marketing Made Easy for HR Consultants. And remember, get marketing, because without marketing, there's no sales. And without sales, there's no business. So get marketing. Hey there, and thanks for listening to the Marketing Made Easy for HR Consultant podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, then please consider taking a moment to help us grow by sharing the episode with a friend or colleague. or by leaving a positive review on podchaser.com. And make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the upcoming episodes. I've been your host, Nick Paninsky, and if you have any questions or want to know more about today's topic, then reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd be delighted to hear from you. See you next time.